Justice like lightning, a brand new team of heroes bursts onto the Marvel scene in like 1997. But it's the Thunderbolts. They got a new movie coming out right away, and this team has nothing to do with that team. But we're going to talk about the first 10 members of the comic book Thunderbolts. I'm Haussmann Comics, and you all are my fans, I guess. Wow, thanks. Awkward. Anyway, let's dive in with a little context. Shortly before this was the entire Onslaught thing. If you're unfamiliar with that, Onslaught was this giant monster, basically, that took on the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, took on everybody. And at the end, the Avengers and the Fantastic Four had to sacrifice themselves to save the day. And the world thought they were gone. They were actually transported to another world created by Franklin Richards in a pocket dimension or something. That's not what we're going to talk about and worry about today. We just need to know New York City was left without two of its biggest teams of heroes. The world needed a new team to rise up and defend it, and in November of 1996, in the pages of Incredible Hulk number 449, we meet that team. They are Mach 1, Songbird, Techno, Moonstone, Atlas, and their leader, Citizen V. These new heroes make their debut and battle the Incredible Hulk. This was the first time any of these heroes were seen, so why do they mention that Meteorite has a history with the Hulk? And even still, why does the Hulk seem to recognize her voice? So it seems we have a bit of a mystery box on our hands we need to unpack. But worry not, dear hostages, we are going to get to that very soon, in something that many people still say is one of the greatest plot twists in comics history. Thunderbolts number 1 by Kurt Busiek and Mark Bagley gives the team their own ongoing title as we see the Thunderbolts doing what they can to keep New York safe. They even take on the Wrecking Crew, which gives them the approval of the public as well as endorsements by the New Warriors and Spider-Man. But at the end of that very issue, Citizen V reveals that he is in fact Baron Zemo, and these new Thunderbolts are actually the current Masters of Evil. That's right, Techno is actually the felonious Fixer, Mach 1 is that bastard the Beetle, Songbird is the scary screaming Mimi, Atlas is the grievous Goliath, and Meteorite is actually the malevolent Moonstone. If you're unfamiliar with any or all of them, you're in luck, because that's what I'm going to do here in this video, is explain each and every one of them, as well as the people that join the Thunderbolts afterward. But before I get right into that, I want to touch upon the creation of the idea of the Thunderbolts itself. Kurt Busiek used to take long drives, and he said to keep himself awake, he would kind of plot out 3 or 4 years of a comic. So on one particular drive, he was like, okay, what if I was writing the Avengers? And he started plotting out how he would write the Avengers. He came up with this idea for a villain to come in and reform themselves and become an Avenger, and then another villain, and over the course of a few years, all of a sudden, all of the Avengers would be pushed out, and these reformed villains would be the new Avengers, and they would reveal themselves to have been the Masters of Evil the whole time, and this was all part of a big, long con. Which actually I think sounds like a pretty cool idea. Anyway, he must have popped that idea in his back pocket, and then later when Onslaught did what Onslaught did, and the chance came, he's like, oh, you know what would work right now would be that idea I had. So he went into them and pitched the Thunderbolts, and they were like, yep, here's Mark Bagley, go get to work on it. And then, of course, that reveal I talked about where they were the Masters of Evil, like somehow that was kept under wraps. And that just made the payoff work that much better. Like, it wasn't reported in Wizard Magazine, people weren't talking about it in the playground, there wasn't really as much internet back then, but like before it came out, nobody knew these were the Masters of Evil. They were like just some new heroes, which on one hand gives you less incentive to buy the comic, but on the other hand, if you go into it cold, like, oh wow, it's a twist. So, who were the Thunderbolts? Let's start with Citizen V, better known as Baron Zemo II. Actually, he's Baron Zemo like the 18th or something, but he's the second Baron Zemo that we got to know in the comics. His father, of course, being the Captain America villain dating all the way back to World War II in the comics. In actuality, he was created in the 60s. But it was he who fired the rocket that took Bucky and Captain America out of the war. And when Captain America returned, so did Zemo. And he had a weird obsession with a glue called Adhesive X. Paste Pot Pete, eat your heart out. Anyway, once Zemo had been dealt with permanently, a son was created to continue the battle between Zemo and Captain America. He also liked glue, but eventually went on to become a decent character and brought back the Masters of Evil and notably laid siege to Avengers Mountain. The whole Thunderbolt scheme was his idea and master plan. Interestingly enough, the name and identity of Citizen V actually dates back to the actual golden age of timely comics. There was a character named Citizen V, and it was retconned that the original Baron Zemo wiped out the original Citizen V, and Citizen V would have many more incarnations over the years before and after Baron Zemo's. Next up is the Fixer, and he actually goes all the way back to 1965 Strange Tales number 141, where he showed up as a foe of Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. He was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Stan Lee must have forgot that he created another character called the Fixer in Daredevil a year earlier. But he was like called the Fixer because he fixed boxing matches. Anyway, he's not a Thunderbolt, never was, so let's not talk about him. Anyway, the Fixer was a genius-level intellect criminal who worked for Hydra and the Masters of Evil. He had a partnership with Mentallo. Also, his name was Norbert, how about that? The Fixer kind of seemed like an omnipresent character throughout the comics, but he actually only appeared 23 times in 30 years before joining the Thunderbolts. Someone who actually kind of was omnipresent was the Beetle, Abner Jenkins. Mach 1 Abner Jenkins actually debuted as the Beetle way back in Strange Tales number 123 in 1964. He was created by Stan Lee and Carl Burgos. He was originally portrayed as a Human Torch villain. I was actually hoping to have an early evolution of the Beetle video done in time for this, but I didn't. But it's coming at some point, so don't hold your breath, but look forward to that. Subscribe, in fact, so you don't miss it. Anyway, the Beetle would go on to tangle with Spider-Man, Iron Man, the Avengers. He actually became one of those general villains, just fights every hero in the Marvel Universe. Before joining the Thunderbolts, Beetle had 60-some appearances in the comics, and that time he did redesign his armor a few times. He also joined the Masters of Evil and a Sinister Six, but not a good Sinister Six. The most notable thing he did was form the Sinister Syndicate. Though he would move on from the role of the Beetle, there were others that would take up the mantle. But old Abner would go on to become a hero and stick with the Thunderbolts, upgrading his armor, becoming Mach 2, Mach 3, Mach 4, and so on. And even once, while trying to hide his identity, he became a black guy. Songbird is who we're going to talk about next, and she actually didn't have a heck of a lot of history before the Thunderbolts, but she was known as Screaming Mimi. Screaming Mimi first appeared in Marvel 2-in-1 number 54 by Mark Gruenwald and John Byrne. She appeared in a group called the Grapplers, and they were a group of female supervillains. They would later join the Unlimited Class Wrestling Federation alongside the Thing and D-Man. Screaming Mimi would pop up here and there in small villain roles, or just even in the background of larger villain group shots. She would notably team up with Angar the Screamer, who could also scream villainously loud. And in flashbacks, we would see his death and how that would affect Melissa Gold. That's Songbird's real name, by the way. But time heals all wounds, and Songbird would eventually enter into a relationship with Mach 1. Atlas is next up, and he actually went on to become one of my favorite Thunderbolts, and boy did he have a history before the Thunderbolts. Both wildly interesting and incredibly dull and boring at the same time. He was created again by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, but this time in Avengers number 21 back in '65. Eric Jostens was a mercenary that got tangled up with the original Baron Zemo and infused with ionic powers, much like Wonder Man. He was given a costume and the name Power Man. He would battle the Avengers a few times and even find allies in the Lethal Legion. Eventually Luke Cage would debut and use the name Power Man for himself. So the original Power Man would show up and battle him for the rights to use the name.
He beat me. Fair and square. Overpowered me. Simply a stronger man. Let's just go ahead and say that guy's better than me. Great. I don't have to fight him anymore.
His power faded a little bit and he briefly went by the name Smuggler, a name that would actually be picked up in the future by his brother. And then due to some experiments by Dr. Carl Malus and Pym particles, Eric Jostens would get some new size-changing powers and take on the name Goliath, previously used by Hank Pym himself and subsequently used by Bill Foster. Also at some point Hawkeye went by the name Goliath, but Jostens would continue his criminal career battling the likes of the West Coast Avengers and Spider-Man. But when the time came to join the Thunderbolts, he took on a mostly original name Atlas, which he only shares with the Greek Titan. Also though, Atlas is what Marvel Comics was called in the 1950s, after Timely but before Marvel. So Smuggler was really his only original name, and it's unoriginal. Because he was a smuggler. He smuggled stuff. The last of the original Thunderbolts is Moonstone, or Meteorite. She debuted in Captain America, but kind of became a Hulk villain. She was a psychiatrist who messed with people rather than helping them, and she's got a standard array of many powers: strength, durability, flight, intangibility, lasers. I always assumed she had like a stone from the moon and that gave her powers, but actually she became infused with a gravity stone of Kree descent. She would take on the name Meteorite with the Thunderbolts. So like I said, those are the original 6 members of the Masters of Evil that went on to become the first Thunderbolts. I always find these videos actually really start to get interesting once you get into the recruits, because 3 of these guys I'm about to talk about are never mentioned in any other Thunderbolts videos that I've been watching, and that's the kind of content you get here on Haussmann Comics. So if you aren't subscribed already, please consider subscribing, hit the like button, and if you want to, become a member like these champions right here you see on screen. They support me for like $1 a month Canadian, which I think is probably like 80-some cents American, and they get to see videos early. That's really the only perk, but it helps me out and I appreciate it. Anyway, let's jump into the recruits of the Thunderbolts. Jolt was an interesting addition to the team because not only was Jolt not a villain previously, she also didn't know that her fellow teammates were either. So not only now are the Thunderbolts pretending to be heroes out in public, they have to keep up the charade behind closed doors because Jolt doesn't know who they are. Jolt first appeared in Thunderbolts number 1, but wouldn't join the team until around number 5. Her parents were shuffled off their mortal coils by Onslaught, and she was then taken captive by Arnim Zola along with several others and experimented on. This gave her electricity powers, and she escaped looking to find help from the Fantastic Four, but since they were gone, the Thunderbolts had actually moved into the Four Freedoms Plaza. The Thunderbolts do help her free the other captives, and she joins them. Though Techno did get his neck broken during that battle, he was able to upload his consciousness to his tech pack and kind of lived on as a robot Techno. Also at this point, and later on, a lot of the Thunderbolts are actually really starting to like being a hero. They're doing what's right, and they like the way it feels. The public is accepting them instead of running away scared from them. They're really starting to like becoming heroes, and Zemo kind of catches on to this, and he's like, no, that's going to interfere with my original plan. So what does he do? He outs them. He goes to the media or whatever, and he's like, these are the Masters of Evil, and I'm Baron Zemo. Ha ha ha, we got you. At that point, most of the Thunderbolts, except for Fixer, turned on Baron Zemo and stopped him from taking over the world with the help from Iron Man. But with their identities blown, they went on the run and continued to fight the good fight, settling up shop in Colorado. And that's when Hawkeye came a knocking, because who better to step up and lead this group of former villains wanting to be heroes than a former villain who wanted to become a hero? Hawkeye. Not much of a villain though, he kind of just fell into the villain camp for a few issues before joining the Avengers. That's right, Hawkeye first appeared in Tales of Suspense number 65, where he battled Iron Man as the villain of the issue. Though, like I said, he was never truly a villain, he was just kind of in the wrong place at the wrong time, in a situation made worse by being seduced by the Black Widow into attacking Iron Man a few more times. Then, of course, he would join the Avengers in Cap's kooky quartet, and he would go on to found the West Coast Avengers, making him more than qualified for the task of leader of the Thunderbolts. He would show up to help the Thunderbolts dressed as the Dread Knight to see if they were on the up and up. Seeing that they were, he decided, hey, I'm going to be your guys' leader, and I can even get you all pardoned. Though Mach 1 would actually have to turn himself over to the police because he was the only one actually wanted for murder. That's the one crime Hawkeye couldn't see them forgiving. Murder. Mach 1 did agree to that to help the reputation of the other Thunderbolts. So as Mach 1 would leave the team, so would Charcoal join the team. And who is Charcoal, you ask? Well, I'm about to tell you. Charcoal was actually created as a part of a Wizard magazine Create a Villain contest. He appeared in Thunderbolts number 19 right before Hawkeye showed up, and he was just a big giant charcoal fire monster that the Thunderbolts battled. But then the Masters of Evil showed up and Charcoal made his getaway. A couple of issues later, he showed up and asked to join the team. He was experimented on by his father and kind of forced into joining a group of radicals as their muscle. He would actually stick around with the Thunderbolts for a good long while, where he was permanently destroyed by Graviton after 40-some appearances. So at this point, Fabian Nicieza was writing the Thunderbolts, and he was going to kill off Charcoal anyway, but he had plans to resurrect him afterwards. But then the original guy from the Wizard contest was like, hey, I think I want some money from this character. Though Wizard never really specified who would keep the rights of the character. Traditionally, in a contest like that, it is usually specified that, hey, Marvel's going to keep the character, you don't own anything. But, as I said, Wizard didn't quite specify that, so this guy was like, I'm entitled to a little bit of cheddar. It is worth saying that he created the look and the name for Charcoal, but then like the backstory and the secret identity and all that stuff was created by Kurt Busiek and Fabian Nicieza. So there was some stuff going on, but then the character, like I said, was killed off. At the same time, the creator was like filing a lawsuit against Marvel. So Marvel was just like, yeah, don't bring him back, leave him dead. So he did. So now, when people are like, oh, nobody stays dead in comics except for, it used to be Bucky and Uncle Ben. But like Bucky's back, Jason Todd's back. Uncle Ben's not quite back yet, but I think it's a fair bet that nobody stays dead in comics except Charcoal. Charcoal will not ever come back. He's probably coming back in the next 2 months. Anyway, I personally don't think Charcoal will ever come back. And that brings us to number 10. It is none other than the Ogre. Way back in X-Men number 28, the world got its first appearance of the Ogre. Some will say that that was overshadowed by the first appearance of Banshee. And I agree, mainly because Banshee went on to, appear more times and join the X-Men. Ogre didn't appear again for like 30 years until Thunderbolt number 28. Ogre was originally part of a mutant group called Factor 3, and they were set up at a base called Mount Charteris. And then when they left, they just kind of left Ogre there. And over the years, other groups came and went, always leaving Ogre behind. But when the Thunderbolts moved in, Ogre just kind of stayed in the shadows and ended up fixing their stuff at night. Eventually they found out and they gladly welcomed him onto the team as the official Thunderbolts engineer. And then literally 10 minutes after he joined the team, the robot Techno knocked him out, put him in a stasis pod, and took his place. So Ogre didn't get to do a lot on the Thunderbolts, unfortunately. And with that, those were the first 10 members of the Thunderbolts. I had a really good time rereading his early run from 97 and on of the Thunderbolts. If you haven't read it, I think it's absolutely worth checking out. The Thunderbolts, this run continues on for quite some time, and I'm actually looking forward to jumping in and doing the next 10, so please let me know that in the comments below by liking this video, doing all those things. Let's, you know, show me basically in the algorithm that this is worth doing another 10 Thunderbolts, because I really want to. But yeah, like I said, the Thunderbolts would go into some wild directions over the years and change quite a bit away from what this original structure was. Yeah, those were the first 10 Thunderbolts. Like I said, I'm probably going to do the next 10 anyway at some point. But thank you very much for checking this out. Stay Hossy, and I definitely know there's some bloopers and outtakes to watch because I was having a hard time recording this one. Anyway, stay Hossy. Thank you. Bye. So now the Thunderbolts. Feel free to subscribe to Master Go if you guys like K-pop or J-pop or just music in general. Master Go has a channel. He's a good friend of mine. He does reactions to music videos. He's phoning me right now. Hello, how are you?
Yep, there he goes.
There he goes, there he goes. I was just recording a video. I thought I'd give you a shout out. Yeah, I am recording. I will pause the recording. I'll come back and keep talking about the Thunderbolts. Just let me take this call. This isn't live. Why am I doing it? Yeah. Okay, bye. Or no, bye them. Jesus. Interestingly enough, the names. So he was given a costume and the name Power Man. Power Man. So that's what you get here from Haussmann Comics. So thanks for watching.